Wir haben dafür gestanden und stehen nach wie vor dafür.
We have stood for and still stand for being an open space of freedom and law, a single market of freedom of movement. But if this European Union does not manage to effectively control the external borders, if what we have jointly decided upon in this European Union with the various regulations, the so-called Dublin regulations, if all this does not succeed, then a state, then a government, first and foremost has the duty to protect its own territory, to protect its own people, and to ensure that this problem does not grow immeasurably, and that we can still somewhat solve it. That is our task, just like any other government in Europe also sees it as its task. The second priority we set for ourselves, even before the parliamentary summer break, was to make the first decisions regarding the ongoing structural weakness of our economy. And dear friends, please, no deception and no illusion there either. For more than 10 years, we have not had any substantial growth. For more than 10 years, we have been falling behind in various technologies around the world, while at the same time, for more than 10 years, disproportionately increasing social expenditures in all their different aspects, as our welfare state looks today. To be clear, we want to maintain this welfare state. We want people to feel secure in our country, that in times of illness, old age, or need for care, they can truly rely on this welfare state. In total, we are falling behind. And this process has accelerated in recent years, especially due to events that are not in our own hands. For example, the tariff policy of the United States of America, which we would wish to be different. But politics is not a wishful thinking concert. The American government is doing this. And no one should believe that this is, so to speak, a short-term phenomenon. Trump did not come overnight, and this American policy will not simply disappear overnight either. It may be that with his successor, it becomes even more difficult. Let's prepare ourselves for the fact that we will also have to deal with a fundamental change in the transatlantic relationship. It is what it is. The Americans are now pursuing their own interests very, very assertively. And that can only mean that we now also need to pursue our own. Pursue our interests. And dear friends, we are not that weak, we are not that small. We are a European single market with 450 million inhabitants. Let's include the British, who unfortunately have left the European Union, but are now very eager, at least in matters of foreign policy and security policy, to align themselves with Europe again. Together with the British, it's 500 million. That is the largest contiguous economic area we have in the world. And that's why it's also about making our voice heard loudly and clearly in this European Union. On the 12th of February, we will hold a special council of the European heads of state and government, where we will focus solely on these issues. How do we manage to restore competitiveness in the European Union? To ensure that this European Union truly becomes the strong and successful single market it was originally intended to be. We are on a pretty good path. But this, of course, is not just limited to Europe. It must also work in Germany. And the European partners look to Germany like no other country. And whether we want it or not, whether I want it or not, we are the ones who have a significant influence on what happens in this European Union. And if Ukraine falls, then he won't stop. Just like in 1938, the Sudetenland wasn't enough. Putin will not stop. And anyone who still believes today that he has had enough should carefully analyze his strategies, papers, speeches, and appearances. No, dear friends, this is about the fundamental change of borders in Europe, the restoration of the old Soviet Union within the borders of the old Soviet Union with a massive threat, including a military threat, to the countries that once belonged to this empire. And therefore, from my point of view, the most important priority we have to address now in the field of foreign and security policy is first, to ensure that we recognize it. Second, to ensure that we continue to provide assistance to Ukraine. That we do not question this. That we do all of this with the unity of Europe. Connect. And I include the United Kingdom once again in these strategic orientations. That we try to maintain NATO and the Western Alliance for as long as possible. But also that we invest in our own defense capabilities, so that deterrence works again. And please let no one say that this is an old and outdated concept. If we do not succeed in increasing the number of female and male soldiers as quickly as we need, then we must discuss obligatory elements of a military service during this legislative period, at least for young men. We cannot yet include women, because the basic law does not allow it. I would like to see it differently. I would like to implement a mandatory community service year in our country. And if it doesn't work on the basis of obligation, then we want to make it as attractive as possible to do it on a voluntary basis. But that is exactly our answer to the young generation. This country offers many opportunities. And there are few countries that offer more opportunities than Germany. But then we also want to have a contribution from you, so that this country can be led into the future peacefully and freely. We are doing this now on a voluntary basis, and if necessary, we will do it in this legislative period on the basis of an obligation.